cannot reach high growth rates of the kind that India and China experience. Even when our growth rate goes up, we cannot sustain it. And in a long-term sense, our growth is coming down. So we have to address this problem in what fashion? First, we have to think about how to, right now, for example, right now we are sitting at about 2-3% growth. Our projection for this year was 2.8 until the flood came around. And now we don't know what it is. There are some who argue that the flood might have a benefit, others who argue that the flood will have a cost. So our growth rate could be anywhere from 2 to 4%. The question is our potential growth rate, our long-term growth rate, as you can see from that line, is about 5-6%. So our first question is, how can we go back to the 4 or 5%, 5% potential? How can we get back to our trend? But to me, that is not good enough, and I'll point out why. We need to think of going further. Next slide, please. Why do we need to go further? We've got a population that is very young, and you at universities experience it much more than we do. We've got a population that is largely under the age of 20. Our working age population is going to grow for a long period of time, for about 30 to 40 years. I won't go into details on that. But roughly speaking, we've done a very rough calculation that our labor force grows at about 3-3.5% per annum. Some would say even 4. Our census is not in, so we can't tell. So if our labor force grows at about 3.5% per annum, output employment elasticity at the best of things is best of times 4.3. Let's take 0.4. We estimate that we need at least 8% per annum to absorb the growing population. 8% is very difficult for us to reach. I think we've only reached it once in our history. The question is, how can we get to 8%? If we don't, these kids are not going to be employed. Even if you educate them, they're not going to be employed. If they're not employed, obviously these kids will think of other things to do. Many of them will not be very pleasant. So we have to think about this, and I think everybody has to think about the economy growing. That's the reason why we want growth. We don't want growth just because we want growth. Growth will give us a good thing in life, especially employment for these people. Next slide, please. Okay. Now here is a calculation that we did. Very simple sort of simulation exercise, simple model. I won't go into the details. The issue is that we have, if we just do business as usual, do nothing, right? Keep going the way we are going, our estimates suggest that we will not get out of the range of 4 or 5%. That's where we'll go. We may be lucky enough to get to 5% in the next 2 or 3 years, but we'll remain in the range of 4 or 5%, right? If we do a minimal amount of change, for example, one of the things that is affecting us the most is the public sector crisis. It's a very bad situation. We've heard the Finance Minister talk about it in his budget speech. We've heard him talk about it in many other areas too. The Prime Minister has mentioned it too. If we can just fix some of those things and get the key fundamental things that are come to going, we could reach 6% in the long term. The question still remains, and this is where the challenge is. This is where I challenge our panel, and this is where I challenge all the universities. This is why we wanted to talk to the key thinkers in the country. The challenge is that 6% is not good enough. India is growing at 9. We have to also begin to see how we can go up. And as Professor pointed out, he is emphasizing innovation and entrepreneurship. And we want to challenge the universities to be a part of the planning system to help us a way to go forward, to move forward. After all, in every country in the world, it's a university system that leads with ideas. The policymakers only follow. And that's the kind of relationship we want to establish, and that's why we are here today. And that's why I think I would urge you, we should probably do it for support or something. Get the university system to help us think this through. Next slide, please. Now here it is. No, go back, please. Let's take a look at that slide. Now here, we can think of ways to move it to 8%. And we present that. We think that just doing the stabilization program, the macroeconomic is very important. Here, these experts will tell you. We have to have macroeconomic stability. If you don't have macroeconomic stability, you will have an inflationary episode. An inflationary episode for Pakistan could be, we're already in the middle of one, but if it goes much further, it huge problem because inflation does have all kinds of ramifications that we can get into that right now, and it will be a big problem for us. So we don't want to afford that. So macroeconomic stabilization is important. That's the middle green line, and some reform with that would take us to 6. But if we think about it, if we adopt a reform and productivity strategies that come to, we can go as high as 8%. Next slide, please. Okay, so what do? We have 3 questions here. How do we get back to trend, which is 5%? How can we accelerate growth to 8 or 9%? And third is how to sustain growth. And I think this is the key issue that the entire university system should be now addressing and telling us. How do we do this? Our strategy is that utilization of existing capacity, could get you up to the trend 5%. We feel that this is not a hard estimate. But talking to people, we understand there's a large excess capacity in industry, fertilizer, auto, sugar, all these sectors are reporting large excess capacity. We can get back to it. What are the major constraints? Well, the first one is fairly obvious. I go back to the public sector enterprise reform. Our energy system is not working. Our energy system is in deep problems. How do we fix it? That's the first thing. And of course, government is borrowing because of the fiscal deficit. The government is borrowing a large amount of money. That means, obviously, there's very little left over for the private sector. At the same time, government borrowing is also creating inflation pressure, which is forcing the central bank to raise interest rates. Result, private sector does not have the money to invest. Some private sector companies can't even get working capital. So I go back to macroeconomic stability. We have to achieve macroeconomic stability. What does that mean? Simply put, our problem is the fiscal problem. We have to stop our fiscal deficit from growing the way it is growing. And you heard the central bank talk about it recently, very frankly, that we have to stop this fiscal deficit. Unfortunately, when we stop this fiscal deficit, what happens? The easy sacrificial lambs of the public sector development program, and sorry to bring you the bad news, even your system is an easy sacrificial target because, that's the way these things work. I mean, that's the way social sectors and public sector investments gets cut. And when public sector investment gets cut, the most affected sector is the social sector because you guys, we are trying to fund you guys. That's a good intention. But good intentions require macroeconomic stability. Next slide, please. So, the question is, we can keep doing macroeconomic stability, which is important, I'm not saying. But I keep saying, governance is multitasking. We must do many things. We can't just stop at macroeconomic stability. We have to think of other things, and that's where we have to think about long-term and increasing potential. Now here is just a simple schematic on how to think about it. We are trying to think of economic growth. And in very simple terms, economic growth comprises of 3 things. There's physical capital, you can build up all kinds of roads, railways, housing, machinery, etc. There's human capital, which is your part, educate kids, etc., etc. And we've been doing that. What we've been doing